May as well begin with our first slide, if this works. Yes, we've got something there. We've got a lot we want to get through. We'll give you a quick introduction of what the project's about, an overview of the structure, which is, I think, fairly critical to the way it's operated and succeeded in many things. The important role that research and the initial assessment has been in advising and guiding the project, as well as monitoring the results of it. The roles that our two main structures, the advisory and alliance groups, have had. The key resources we've used, maybe some hints of what we would have liked to have more of. You might guess money is one of those things. The activities we've been involved in and their importance, the evaluation and the impact measuring of the outcomes, and an ongoing view of what we intend to be doing in the future as we move forward. Now, hopefully, if this works, Lynn will take over. No, she won't, because I'm going to run this. Why Kiama?
Now stop for a moment, think about the world, think about the people, think about their lives. Stop for a moment, think about the system, think about your children, think about the whole world.
Okay, Lynn.
Well, why Kiama? I mean, I think you can see from those beautiful photos in the background, why not? We're very lucky to be part of the beautiful coastline of the southeast of New South Wales, and Kiama, for obvious reasons, again, from those photos, is one of what we call a sea change town in Australia, where a lot of older people choose to retire. It also has a very strong history and stable local community. You can see the green pasture fields and the dairy in the background. When we were first approached at the University of Wollongong to see whether or not we could be part of one of the first pilot projects for dementia-friendly activities in Australia, Kiama was a really quite strategic choice for us, not only because it was likely from its age, sort of its demographic profile, to have quite a large number of people living with dementia, but also because of the work of the Kiama Municipal Council. So the Kiama Council has an incredibly strong history of community engagement. It has a lot of strong processes, and its typical way of working is quite consultative. And it had also done a bit of work around thinking about how the community there could be aged friendly. So for us, it was a really important decision to be working with a local government that worked in a similar way to the way that we thought was important in a project like Dementia-friendly Kiama, but also one that had this strong history and tradition of community engagement. So the alliance between the University, Dementia Australia, the council and the community was also important because of the proximity. So this meant for us as a university, we weren't going to be removed from the community with which we were working, and that was a really important feature in choosing the Kiama community as well. We really wanted not just to move away from the biomedical model of dementia, but away from people with dementia being somehow objects or subjects that we study somehow. So it's very important for us, in terms of becoming a more dementia-friendly university, that we were deeply engaged in what was happening in the community and saw ourselves as part of this work rather than as somehow distant from us. So the project, as I said, came about when Alzheimer's Australia approached both the university and the council to participate in the pilot project. And I guess it really is a story about a coalition of people and organisations coming together to try and increase the livability of Kiama for people living with dementia. So for us, it was about challenging the biomedical model of dementia, being sure we adopted a structure with people with dementia at the heart of all our decision making. You know, we had a look at other dementia-friendly projects that had been occurring at that point in time historically throughout the world, which very much seemed to sort of be sitting at this level of messages about dementia, and we wanted our project to be quite different to that. We wanted people to be, our project to be working towards social inclusion and trying to ensure that the community of Kiama really saw people with dementia as part of the community rather than just as recipients of care. We took an enablement approach, and I think we were also very interested by the work of people like Kate Swapper and DAI around taking this disability rights approach.
Okay, a quick overview of the structure of the project. If I can get it to run, I've got to turn that thing off first. Yeah. No, hang on. I just experimented here and I've done something I shouldn't have done. Well, it was a coming together of Dementia Australia, or Alzheimer's Australia then, Kiama Council and the University of Wollongong, who conducted the pilot was a coming together of Dementia Australia, or Alzheimer's Australia then, Kiama Council and the University of Wollongong, who conducted initial research to identify the local needs and assets within the community. This led to the formulation of our unique project structure. Thus, the project is defined by two groups: the Dementia Advisory Group, or the DAGs, made up exclusively of people with a diagnosis of dementia and their immediate carers. The Kiama Dementia Alliance is a broader group made up of members of the Kiama Council, the University of Wollongong, Alzheimer's Australia, local service providers, local healthcare workers, local interested citizens, and also members of the DAGs. The DAGs contribute ideas and actions to the broader alliance, who does nothing without the input of the DAGs. Both groups work together. Working groups are formed from all interested people on an ad hoc basis to perform particular tasks or gather particular advice. The whole project rests on a foundation of community involvement and active support that is informed by our lived experience and ongoing research. Okay, I've got a little technical problem going on at this end. I've discovered that my new video card doesn't like to support 3 monitors in high resolution while transmitting and receiving video at the same time, so periodically it plugs something out on me. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick overview of our advisory group, or the DAGs as we've call ourselves these days. The structure of the group is essentially made up of people with dementia, their immediate care partners, and sort of by invitation, other people that are interested in contributing or observing or can support that group in that environment, as it were. The structure also requires that the chairman of the group, which I've been blessed with that role, is a person with dementia. We also have a backup where required. Initially, we met formally prior to the broader alliance meeting, so we could, provide input in directly what was happening with the larger group afterwards. But we quickly realised that we needed to meet in more informal environments to better gather the input from all our members and who couldn't really commit to being involved in that formal meeting structure. That's led us on to change some of our roles in what we do. And initially our roles were really fairly narrow, to advise the broader alliance and to evaluate actions that were planned and outcomes. But we quickly moved into the stage of being actively involved in initiating and carrying out those actions of the the broader alliance. We also morphed into our own social support group and have actively become part of representing the role or the face of dementia locally and in the last 12 months nationally as well. Now, moving on, Nick will talk about the Alliance Group.
Good morning, everybody, or good evening, I would say as well, I guess. So with Dennis's little video there before, which reflects some of Dennis's creativity and energy that he's brought to the project, has given you, I guess, a reasonable good idea of the Alliance and who's involved. Basically, the idea is that the advisor group decides on what are the priorities and what are the right strategies to address the various priorities. And then the Alliance group is there to bring community input, but also to obviously ensure there's the implementation is across the community. So the goals, the group really has been about the implementation of the various activities along with the DAGs. Nothing is done without a member of the DAGs standing alongside us, and whether it's community education, talking to doctors, anything we do in coalition. So it says there that the Alliance was coordinated by Council, and that is true, but it wasn't initially really. It was really the model and the coordination of the project was initially carried out by then Alzheimer's Australia, who had a project worker, Kylie Watkins, and really by Lynn. And and Council was a passenger initially, in the sense that we were not the active drivers of the project. Excuse me. We had the contacts within the communities and the local knowledge, and as Lynn will emphasise later, understanding the community was a really important part of the work that was done here, so that we knew we were tackling the issues in a way that made sense for the local community as well. But once we secured a bit of funding and employed a project worker, that's when Council really took on a more proactive role within the broader project. Who's up next, Dennis?
You are.
Oh, I'm still going. Okay. I'm moving through my slides here too. So, and I've got problems myself.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the project officer has been a key resource, absolutely integral to coordinating and resourcing the various activities of the project. Obviously, Lynn mentioned our community has a fairly strong history of getting involved in projects, and that's an important thing to acknowledge, that this project has taken place in a community that likes to engage with its local council, likes to engage with each other. They feel safe to get out and be involved. It cannot be overestimated the enabling aspect of a well-engaged community. So if we were to try and do our project, pick it up and take it to another community, that wouldn't necessarily work in its current form. Firstly, because you need to target what you're doing in a way that is reflective of the way that community works. But we're very lucky in Kiama that people do have a history of getting out and getting involved. And so when we put on education, people turned up. When we had different forums, etc., people readily participated. So that's a really important thing to acknowledge. And of course, the involvement of the university, giving the academic rigour and helping steer the project, has been incredible. And of course, as Dennis mentioned earlier, a key resource is always the financial aspects. That's a real enabler in these kind of projects as well.
Okay, Lynn.
So I guess for us, what was really important in this project was to try and base the actions around the experiences of people that were living with dementia in the Kiama community. And this wasn't something, you know, it wasn't like we gathered this information and then acted. This is something that has been in a constant cycle of us, you know, learning about what it is like to live in Kiama. And also, I guess, trying to adapt our activities to the changing needs of people that are members of the group as well. But I guess to begin with, we were really wanting to understand what it was that we needed to specifically address in the context of Kiama. So again, this sort of approach, if people are looking to kind of model it, is about really trying to understand your local context, about trying to understand not only the needs in that context, but also the assets and the strengths that you can work with in the context of that community. And I guess we went through a process of trying to understand then in terms of taking action around those identified assets and working within the strengths of the community, what we achieved. So we did, you know, some fairly typical kind of research approaches initially with trying to do interviews and focus groups. And, you know, I learned that I wasn't a very dementia-friendly researcher. I had mainly actually done my work and my PhD with carers of people with dementia because I had wrongly assumed that people with dementia wouldn't be able to participate in research projects. And so for me, this was and the team from the University of Wollongong, this was an incredible learning experience. And I'm very thankful for the people with dementia that I've had the opportunity to work with and the way that they have taught me about ways to engage people in a meaningful way in research. And, you know, sometimes we've done that really well, and sometimes, you know, we've had to really adapt and change what we've done to make that more appropriate and more enabling. So we tried some different tactics in our interviews and focus groups, and thought a lot about the way that those groups were structured and the timing of those groups and the environments in which they occurred. I spent a lot of time in people's homes, actually getting to really understand what it was like for them, you know, walking around in the home with them, spending time with them. And also we did neighbourhood walk-arounds with people as well. And so actually spending that time with people was really important, and having them give the commentary to us about what it was like to go to places and why they went to particular places. We moved that up a level, and we tried to sort of map that on the Kiama community and try and understand where the places were in Kiama that people were identifying that were really friendly and enabling, because we thought that was important information to promote. And we were also interested in environments that actually required work, either in the context of the social environment, so places that they might have gone, particular shops, or you know, council workers, or places that maybe people needed education, or groups that needed education, and also some issues in the physical environment. So we also used some GIS and mapping tools and tried to represent those things visually for people, and you know, in recognition that people respond to different types of information, and that can be helpful. We spent quite a bit of time developing a tool that would allow us to audit our public buildings, and we learnt about the value of dementia design principles in a couple of our community facilities, so working particularly in the community library and the community college. And importantly, we had a baseline understanding of what our community attitudes were. And I know Nick talked about the general community being very welcoming and open, and people did talk to us about the fact that one of the things they loved about living in Kiama was they felt quite connected, that the community in general was mostly open and engaging. However, what was interesting when we did our community survey was they actually had quite low expectations of people with dementia. So they didn't tend to think that people with dementia needed community facilities. They responded with attitudes like the fact that they didn't really expect you could have a meaningful conversation with people with dementia. And the other main thing that we found out from the community was that they really didn't know where to go to learn more about dementia, how to access information and resources and services and support. So all of these pieces of research have really informed our initial action plan and also our ongoing activities.
Okay. Nick.
No, sorry, it's still Lynn.
Oh, it's still Lynn. I was looking at the next one.
So that project structure that we developed allowed us to then reflect on the research together. So we did that in the context of workshops with lots of whiteboards and butcher's paper and sticky notes and colourful pens. We developed an action plan, and we really came up with some quite specific goals, and that was not just to increase community awareness in general, but particularly to understand the diversity of the lived experience of dementia. So we really felt like the community consultation and surveying we'd done showed us that people didn't understand the diversity of the dementia experience and the strengths of people with dementia as well. So that was one of our goals. We wanted to create new opportunities for social participation and involvement. So what was interesting in the interviews was that we found there were a number of people that were living with dementia who had been quite involved in local groups, but their ability to maintain that involvement had ceased, either because they were not willing to come forward and talk about their diagnosis, so there was some self-stigma going on, or because those local groups and clubs didn't really know how to adapt to be inclusive for people. So one of the strengths we identified in Kiama was that there were lots of social groups and opportunities for activities. This was an active community. But not very many of those had thought about the inclusion of people with dementia. So we were really looking at working with local clubs and communities to try and help them become more inclusive of people living with dementia. And we were looking also at in our initial action plan to see if we could make some improvements to the physical environment in the community, particularly around signage of public toilets, and we identified some issues with pedestrian crossings originally as well.
Okay.
So some of our activities, if we were to list our activities, we would go on forever. There's been extraordinary reach of the project, way beyond what we initially thought may be possible, I would acknowledge. But certainly one of the activities that has been our main activity has been around community education. As Lynn has identified, stigma is, and you would all know, stigma is a huge barrier to participation. So we took an approach very early on. If we get people talking about dementia, then that in itself will play a significant role in reducing stigma. And of course, if you go to the next level, get people more understanding of what dementia is and what are the lived experiences of people living with dementia, and let them know that there's still lots of capabilities and aspirations and contributions that people living with dementia can make. And so that general community education has been very important. In addition, we've done another level of training with our community, and that is what we were calling Dementia Friends, which was really about just trying to give individuals some insight and some skills that they could use to help support other people living with dementia who they interact with, whether through community groups, etc. So again, being an enabler to support people to continue to feel welcomed and supported to participate in whatever activities they choose throughout the community. So training of the community has been really important. But we've also gone out to our service clubs and our community groups, and Dennis and I have delivered many talks. Linda and Vida and all of our other DAG members have all been involved in going out and speaking to these clubs and groups and to our medical practitioners, raising awareness. amongst our local businesses, and our Chamber of Commerce has got involved. So it's been a really important aspect of, and probably the most successful aspect of the project has been the way people have responded and attended our community education sessions, and which we continue to this day. Now we're doing what we call pop-up sessions, where we just head out into the community, set up an event. Yesterday afternoon, the guys were down at our local farmers market, and just giving people, having a physical presence, encouraging people to come up and say g'day, and it's amazing how many people do get involved. But of course, having the active DAGs, as Dennis mentioned earlier, they've also broadened their role into being social support, and that's been really, really important. And they're involved on the National Advisory Group, and of course through this network, the DAI network, that's been really important support and I guess network for the project, to meet people like yourselves and get a sense of the broader international movement and approaches to working with people with dementia and on a community level, and we've been very grateful for that broader international network, which Linda Henderson in particular has been really, really active in, and that really actually plays a big role in knowing that we're heading in the right direction as well.
So there are a couple of questions there. One about the business chamber and how they've got involved, Nick, and whether we approached businesses or whether they approached us.
Well, we've a bit of both, really. We've certainly our chamber got involved. Well, they self-initiated an activity earlier on in the project, setting up a business forum, which we then got involved and helped finalise the plans for and deliver. And they had the head of what was Alzheimer's New South Wales come down, and also the CEO of the Taxi Council, New South Wales Taxi Council. So, because our local chamber has one of our previous councillors very involved, and this councillor and his wife run a local transport business, and they are quite involved in the disability space. They've sat on our access committee and been involved there. But in other words, they have an understanding of the support needs of people with disability, and they've played a role in that. So they've gone on and tried to get the business chamber involved in the project. So they've run their own forum, plus they've helped fund some of the project. $2,500 helped pay for some of the costs associated with our project officer for a while. But we've also done some work more directly with businesses, but not as this is one area where we want to do some more work, because we're still honing the tools and the approach that we use with local businesses, because while we're fascinated by the work that we're doing and see the importance of it, while their commitment is more tempered by the sort of financial and physical realities for them, finding the time to attend a training session has been a more of a challenge for our business community, and particularly for them to see it as a priority to send their staff along to training. So while we've put on training and they've committed to attending, very few have actually stepped through to the attendance. That's the businesses outside of those groups that are already involved in the project. So the for business community has been more of a challenge, but we're still working in that space. We're still chipping away. So more work to be done, but has been very encouraging, their involvement and response so far.
So we talked about doing some work in the physical environment as well. So basically when we began this process, we realised that actually maybe partly because of the views of the public and academics, people hadn't really thought about community buildings needing to be designed from the point of view of dementia-friendly design principles. So we were very lucky to have Professor Richard Fleming working with us on this project, and we were able to take some of the tools that he had developed for use in residential aged care, and also benefited from some work in the UK by Mitchell and Burton to actually do work with our DAGs and with the Alliance to develop a community building audit tool. And we were able to use that tool to walk through a couple of really important community assets in our local area, the Kiama Library and the Kiama Community College, who were probably the two, I guess, businesses, for want of a better word, who really did engage with the project and became part of our alliance as well, and also one local pharmacy. And they were all involved in auditing their environments and developing an action plan and doing some education for their staff as well. I think that they all found the current process that is, and the toolkit, we tried that, the one that's been developed by Dementia Australia, and I think there's definitely work that needs to be done, not only in terms of improving the usability of that tool, but also the whole kit. Having said that, the tool itself we're very proud of, because it's actually being used nationally and internationally now to improve the physical environment. I know that Douglas and Eileen and the DAT members who are on the video conference this morning used that tool in their own library as well to try and prompt some improvements in some floor coverings and things that were in there. And we know from the work that's been done that we've had more than 100 buildings audited in different communities in Australia now using that tool. We've also been doing some work, as I said, around the mapping of dementia-friendly places and spaces and ideas for action, and that was really an idea to try and keep crowdsourcing information from people with dementia and their care partners living in the Kiama area, and continuing to feed us information about their ideas for action in the community as well. And we've had a number of other communities take up those mapping tools as well. We have representation now of our DAGs on the Council's Access Committee. So we really see that as quite a significant achievement, and it shows also how dementia-friendly the Council is becoming, that they see it as central to their work on access in the local community to have a representative of people with dementia on that committee. So in terms of civic participation, that's a great outcome. And we still are in the process of plans for improving pedestrian crossings and some work around the naming of bus stops. And I tell you, we have found this work to be incredibly hard. And I think perhaps it reveals an issue about how much you can achieve locally, because some of the things we wanted to change in the environment weren't within the jurisdiction of the local council. We really needed to have state level government on board, particularly around planning. And so some of the work we would have liked to have done in the physical environment has actually proved quite difficult.
I just want to add a little bit in there too. It's some of those processes have become ingrained into the normal business of, well, for want of a better word, the Kiama Council. In the beautiful example, last year there was a public toilet rebuilt, and as part of that process, they actually requested information about the appropriateness of the signage they were intending to use. Okay.
Yeah, and you can't underestimate the benefit in, I get, longevity, if you like. We've only been going for a few years, but we're starting to get some traction outside of the project, and there's self-generated activities, and that's an example that Dennis just cited of where the thinking has about, or consideration for how we do things in Kiama is now broadening out to other major participants within the council. And so they came to us asking what would be the appropriate signage in that case. The other thing I would acknowledge is In New South Wales, where is the state in which Kiama is situated, also now has legislation in place where every council across the whole of New South Wales has to have a disability inclusion action plan that is informed by local people with disability. And Kiama Council obviously has one as well, which I've overseen its implementation and its delivery across the council. And that has a whole range of activities that is integrated into what's called our integrated planning and reporting framework, which now requires various council officers and managers and directors across council to report on what they're doing in regards to the various strategies within that disability inclusion action plan. And embedded in that plan are some of those actions around our physical environment, which we haven't had as much traction in. So, for example, one of the actions in the plan is to review all our bus stops in our local government area with a view to making them more easily identifiable individually, therefore assisting people to use the public transport and to easily identify the stop in which they plan to get off on. So that's just another example of where some of the work of the project is having a broader reach and is being embedded in the systems and processes across council.
So I guess you can see that we've been quite busy. And whilst we've had a part-time project officer, all of that really has been done in the context of the giving of time from our advisory group and the Alliance, and also by those of us from the university and from council on top of our other jobs, and for people who have been volunteering in terms of them managing and juggling all the other commitments that they have. So it really has shown how much you can do in the context of a committed group of local people and organisations. We weren't just busy though, we were also busy talking about what we were doing, and I think this made a really big difference. So this particular slide, I think, for us highlights the importance of the fact that these activities were embedded as part of a social marketing campaign, that we really were looking to harness and use local and national media to raise awareness around this. And this was a big part of how we developed momentum for these activities and began to change community activities. We also committed ourselves with the resources of this project to developing resources for the benefit of the greater region. So things like the Dementia Illawarra Shoalhaven website did map out a pathway of care and highlight local activities and services that people could access. And the DAGs also have developed their own website to really support their peer support and advocacy work as well. And I think those two sites have worked very well together in that sense. One of the critical things is that, again, people with dementia have been the spokespeople in a lot of the media that we've done as well, and I think that has also been really critical to changing public attitudes and modelling the inclusive behaviours that we're hoping to embed in our community, and also allowing people with dementia to be you know, our teachers in terms of their own public statements and the way that they have represented the issues locally as well. Oh, not me again.
That's what we all say.
So we did some work, as I said before, in trying to have a look at particularly around how the work we were doing was changing community attitudes, because I think we talk a lot about awareness and stigma, but there really hasn't been very much assessment of this and the way that these types of local activities, when they are embedded as part of a broader and consistent campaign, can shift results. So we did a baseline survey in 2014 of community members 18 and older, and also of businesses and organisations, and really we were able to repeat that survey again a couple of years later, and you know, the statistical analysis we did showed that we had seen a shift in community attitudes to being more positive towards dementia, and people living with dementia and their capabilities. So we did see some shifts in some of those attitudes that I talked about before. People expect less likely to say that they wouldn't expect a meaningful conversation with people with dementia, people more likely to recognise that people with dementia needed to use community facilities. And really interestingly, we also saw this sort of anticipated stigma decrease. So the people who answered in our survey in 2016 were less likely than those that answered our survey in 2014 to say that if they themselves got dementia, they would feel ashamed or depressed or humiliated. So we had begun to feel that we had begin to see those significant attitudes changing. For people who attended our education and training, they were more likely than our general community members to show those changes. And I think in terms of the other evaluation we did around those activities, we can say without a doubt that it was the involvement of people with dementia in that training and education that made the difference. People being able to meet people with dementia, to ask them about their lived experience, to actually see them involved in and sharing their expertise of what it was like to live with dementia in the ways that they had adapted were really critical to changing those attitudes.
Still you.
So as I said, we'd used multiple communication channels, not just media though. We were really relying on word of mouth and getting out there on the ground. We've done lots of walking up and down streets and printing of brochures and putting up paper posters as well. I think I've said all of those things.
Okay.
Attendance at education and the direct involvement of people with dementia. You know, we really learned a lot from looking at the mental health movement in this sense. And when you look at the research evidence around that, we've known for some time that one of the most effective ways to reduce stigma is through the meeting of people who are in or part of that stigmatized group. So again, I think this project reinforces the importance of that involvement if we really are interested in changing public attitudes.
Okay.
So, what are our key points for success? From our perspective, it's been absolutely integral to have this shared philosophical approach to the project. That is, working from a strengths-based perspective, looking at the assets in our communities and within people and organisations, and building on those, not looking at deficits, not emphasising deficits. Has been the shared values that has allowed this project to grow. And of course, one of the most important shared values and philosophical approaches has been about the importance of understanding all the issues and what we're doing from the perspective of lived experience. And of course, we've had a fairly strong focus on the social implications of living with dementia as opposed to the medical implications, if you like. Another really important key point of our success has been the mentoring provided by people like Kate Swaffer. Kate was involved very early on in the piece. In fact, she was employed by Alzheimer's Australia at the time to help them establish their dementia-friendly projects across Australia, is what I understand. But having someone there saying, here I am, I'm speaking publicly, I have dementia, but I've got plenty to give, come and get involved, I think was really important. And of course, having, well, we've got Vida here. Vida was involved right from the beginning. She was very happy to stand up like Kate and say, come and get involved. And I think that made a big difference as well. The academic rigour of having a university involved has obviously brought a lot of credibility to the work that we're doing, and given us that insight into to what is working and what's not working. So that's been absolutely integral. I work for a fantastic organisation, Kiama Council. We're very lucky to have such a positive organisation in our community. It is reflective of the community, but it also the success of the project is very much founded that I've had the support from all our counsellors and general manager down to get involved in anything and everything that we do. The project has grown very organically. We've tried to be considered and measured in the way that we do things, but we've also been responsive to where we're getting the traction. I've talked about the community education. That was where we got a lot of traction. And we've implemented a whole range of other activities along the way, but you try things out. So you let ideas flow and you resource people and those ideas, and you're not sure what's going to happen, but sometimes you'll be surprised, and that's very much been the way we've worked as well. Having the project officer, I've emphasised that in the past, but it's this process of local ownership and investment in the ideas at a community level that is obviously integral. People owning it, getting involved, can't overemphasise that. And of course, our wonderful DAGs and our chief DAG, Dennis Frost, DAG in name and DAG in nature, I might say. But it's been really, really, really important. So they're the key points as we see it.
Okay. Just to probably reinforce that, but to give you a personal perspective, the project has given me a stronger connection with the community than what I really had before when I was teaching within the community. I feel like I can make more of a contribution to the community than I did as a paid professional, as it were. Also, not just the project, but the exposure to other people in the broader, if you will, like dementia community, has given me the desire and the ability to actually speak up and make a stand, I suppose. And also the development of our peer-to-peer network has really provided some real meaningful support that is just not available through the conventional mediated channels that exist. I also now feel that I can make a real contribution not only to the local community, but for everyone who's in a similar position. And I can see that sort of connection spreading worldwide. And what I find is also that one of the traditional stigmas is the loss of your friends. And I find now that I probably have more valued friends than I had before. The one thing dementia has done is weeded out the less valuable friends and allowed for the growth of some better new ones.
We love you, Dennis.
What we're going to show you now is hopefully, yes, it's going to work, a little bit of our self-promotion, but an overview of quickly what we think we've done or are doing. This is my MRI from a couple of years ago. So those of you who doubt that I have a brain, there's most of it.
Really don't mind if you sit this one out. My words but a whisper, your deafness a shout. I don't need no arms around me, and I don't need no drugs to calm me.
Now you can see what Dennis spends most of his time doing when he's not out there terrorising people. He's creating these little creative video ads.
Yeah, and if that didn't wake you up, I'll be around your place with a cattle prod.
So if I can just add, I think those videos reflect some of the creativity that Dennis has brought to the project, but reflects also one of the other things it's just occurred to me to say is that we do have a bit of fun in this project too. Life is about obviously enjoying it to the full, and Dennis has brought that sense of love for your fellow human, but engagement at a fun level, and that you can still there are still things to celebrate in our lives as you meet different challenges, and I think that's been an important flavour in this project to actually have fun, and there is humour, and there is that really personal engagement. And I think those videos reflect Dennis's approach that has sort of permeated across the project.
We said we were going to talk about challenges too, and I'm going to whip through these because I know we're starting to have eaten up our time. But I guess one of the big challenges for us in this project is this whole thing about what our mission is and what our mandate is, and how we sit along the other services and supports that exist for people with dementia and their care partners in the community. And for us, because we've been at this for a few years now, we have actually certainly seen a lot of the members of our group, we've seen their symptoms progress, and we've seen life become more challenging for them. And I guess what we are witnessing is real gaps in the services for people with dementia, where we're experiencing the frustration of finding access to services. We're experiencing the frustration of the amount of support not available not being enough, the support for carers not being enough, and the system not being responsive enough to people's real life conditions. We have tried and we've worked hard in our advocacy options, in our advocacy work, to try and secure more funds to meet people's needs. But at the moment, unfortunately, in Australia, we've adapted this care system which sees people as individuals receiving care and doesn't really appreciate the sort of community level resources and supports that are needed to support delivery of specialised care. So I guess we have had a history, as you've seen, in focusing very much outwards towards how our work can change community attitudes. And but as the needs of our members change, I think we are facing the challenges of how to care for one another in the context of not having the current resources at the moment to become alternative providers of care, or to achieve a lot of successes in trying to advocate for more care and support services at that higher end of the spectrum. So that has definitely been one of our challenges, to, I guess, resist becoming an alternative service provider, or do we have to actually change our mandate to some degree to make sure that we are being responsive to the needs of our current members as well.
Okay, move on. A little bit about what we're currently planning to do, and probably the first thing we're really attempting to do is structure our DAG group as a standalone legal entity, so we can source our own funding independent of other groups, and use that to fund our activities and whatever we require in that way. We're also trying to balance our, as Lynn was saying, the emphasis we've been placing on raising community awareness and versus investing time in our own peer group, as it were. And by default, we're also beginning to expand into surrounding local government areas at different levels. A lot of our activity and support is coming from people outside the area because they have nothing where they are, or nothing that they find adequate compared to what's available locally. And I suppose it's a part of the idea of making not just Kiama, but the world a more dementia-friendly, enabling place. And we're also continuing to develop our own resources and work with other groups to, well, one good example is our involvement in research projects. My video's coming and going all over the place now. We're actually encouraging people involved in research to come in and work with us rather than have us disappear off all around the country to talk to their research projects. Okay, moving on. Yeah, Lynn to finish.
I think we can all finish. I think we just wanted to acknowledge in the end that you know, you set out on a project like this to kind of try and transform a community, and actually I think ultimately in the end we all feel quite personally transformed by this. That actually an involvement in a project is about changing all of our experiences and attitudes. And you know, I know the term dementia friendly has been derided by some, but you know what, I do feel that in this project, like Dennis, I've made true and valued friends. And you know, that's been a very treasured experience. And I think certainly at the university level we have also been transformed, and you know, we've embarked on a program of really trying to have a look at the way that our university works and the opportunities that we provide for all our students, not just our health and social care professionals, but our accountants and our lawyers and our engineers and our teachers and all of those people, to see if we can become more of a champion across the board for the dementia cause. So yeah, just really wanting to acknowledge the transformation in both ways. The fact that this project started out as a pilot project and it has heavily influenced the new Dementia Australia National Strategy. And Dennis and Nick, you might want to finish with a couple of those other points.
Just reinforce it is a personal, you feel very connected when you connect with people in such a deep and meaningful way across the project. So you're impacted on a personal level, but at an organisational level. I talked a little bit earlier about some of the change thinking at council, and that's been wonderful, and a great privilege.